My father told me a story once. I'll never forget it for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he ever told me as a child. It's also the story of how my grandfather died. But honestly, that isn't the reason. You hear stories on TV, or sometimes you overhear something in a public place. People talk about ghosts and aliens, and you think to yourself, that ain't real. They're making it up, or they're mistaken, or they're crazy, or something like that. You just can't believe it. Until something happens. Something that brings it all together, connects the dots in a way you didn't think of before. Maybe it happens to you. Maybe you hear the same story again and again, happening to different people. It doesn't take long for the world to become a lot bigger than you thought it was. As I said, this is a story my father told me, but I never believed it, even though he swore up and down it was true. It wasn't until I started clicking around the internet that I started to believe. I started to hear other stories just like the one my father told me. It didn't take me long to believe in the rake. That's not what my father called it, of course. He's never used the internet in his life. He wouldn't know what the consensus has taken in naming it. When he chose to call it something other than it or that thing, he called it Skinwalker, after an old Cherokee tale his grandfather told him. But I'll tell you the story, the way he told it to me.
We were out hunting one night. Coyotes. We killed them for $50 a skin. We'd kill calves sometimes. We do it every night because we needed the money. Sometimes when we were out, we'd come on a deer and kill it. Our landlord didn't mind, and it could feed our family for a few nights and save us some money. Anyway, we were done making our rounds and heading home walking because we didn't have a car or some four-wheeler back then. We cut through the woods. That's when we came up on it. Blood. Everywhere. Splattered on the trees, in the grass, in the creek, everywhere. First we figured it was a pack of coyotes. We've seen it sometimes. They can't scavenge and they start hunting deer or cattle. The worst is when they breed with feral dogs, but this wasn't like that. See, when a pack of dogs, or wolves, or coyotes, attack something, they do it right. They'll pick off one that's weak, or sick, or old, or just small. They'll hunt it, drop it into a corner, someplace it can't get out of. And they'll run it right down to the biggest one, the alpha. And that deer will never see that alpha. It might hear it, but it won't see it. It'll just notice its throat is gone. It'll drop dead. It's quick. It's clean. That wasn't what happened here. Something had run up on a den of deer. Coyotes won't attack a den. Wolves neither, because they'd get too much of a fight. These were three bodies, just torn apart. You'd see a head here, a leg here, a torso there. Predators don't do that. They don't leave behind scraps. What had done this hadn't done it for food. It had done it for fun. We didn't know that. We saw a bunch of carcasses and we think it's something we gotta take care of. I remember my dad telling me to go home. He thought it was a pack of feral dogs. But I wasn't leaving him, and I damn sure wasn't walking through 2 miles of woods alone with nothing but a .22 and a pocket knife. Dad had the shotgun, and I wasn't going anywhere without it. It took me a while to convince him, but we finally began tracking whatever did that. It wasn't hard either. We just followed the blood. Either that thing bled a deer before it got away, or dragged one for a mile. I don't know. I never seen my dad more scared before that night. We started hearing noises. I've been in a lot of woods in my life. I've been all over the world, and ain't never heard a noise like that night. I heard things screaming. I heard deer and fox and rabbits and raccoons and birds just scared. Keep in mind, this is maybe 12 or 1 o'clock. Except the fox and some birds, nothing was supposed to even be awake. But they were just awake. They were moving. I saw flocks of birds that night fly straight into trees to try to get out of there. We came up on a pack of coyotes and nearly shot a couple thinking it was what we were looking for us, but then we saw they were running towards us. We ran right past us, didn't even notice. And some deer did the same. And some rabbits, squirrels, foxes, even a couple of wild hogs. These things were supposed to be eating each other. The only thing they cared about was getting out of here. We should have put it together. Maybe whatever we were tracking wasn't something we were supposed to see, and wasn't something we could kill. I don't know why we didn't just go home. Guess we were curious. Guess that was my dad's nature, to go towards trouble, to fight. Knowing what I know about my father did during the war, my nature was to stay close to him. Finally get into an open valley. It was normally a soy field, but it wasn't in season, so it was just flat dirt. We saw the tracks then. A lot of animals fleeing the forest had paved over the land. Where that deer blood was, nothing had taken a single step. They were leaving it for us to find. The tracks were shallow. Whatever it was couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, but that didn't mean much. Bobcat weighing 40 pounds, wet, nearly tore up my damn throat once. Well, that means that it's quick and hard to hit. So I followed the tracks, and it doesn't take us long to find out where it is. There's this old schoolhouse that sits on the top of the hill. Half of it had been ripped out by a tornado, but nobody lived there, not for a long time. We caught homeless people in there sometimes, or druggies looking for a safe place to shoot up. Figured maybe that was it. Maybe some sick kid riding a high. We didn't think that for long. We get within 50 yards and we hear this noise, screeching sort of sound. Sort of made of two different sounds. One was a high-pitched screech, another was a low-pitched growl. It was making both, but at the same time. We get within 20 yards and we hear this sound. I can remember thinking that it sounded like paper being torn apart while someone was swinging water in a bucket back and forth. Dad looks at me, kneels down, and whispers, "I gotta stay behind him because we're about to corner him. Any animal will fight when it's cornered, especially when it's a predator. We can tell by the tracks that it's just one. He tells me it's probably a single feral dog, probably rabid. The plan is to sneak up on it while it's eating, shoot it, and then keep shooting at it till it don't move anymore and slit its throat. If it gets to Dad, my job is to shoot it, or stab it, or get it off of him." So he walks up, and I'm right behind him, just a tad to his side so I can see what it is. I wish to this day I hadn't. It was leaning over a carcass, tearing off its flesh and throwing what it doesn't nibble at his side. There's blood all over the brick, glistening in the moonlight. It itself is pale white, human-looking, but not quite human. With arms and legs like a human, but it sat like a monkey, hunched over. And its hands weren't normal. It had long fingers with claws in the end. So we see that, my dad hesitates. He wasn't about to fire on a person, so he clears his throat to try to get it to turn around. I swear to God, all the noise just ceased. I ain't never heard true silence before that, and not after. For 2 seconds, nothing made any noise. Which made it all the louder when it turned around and made this shrill cry and jumped on Dad. He got a shot off. I think he missed. He hit the thing, it didn't mind, but it was on him, tears parts of him off. I start shooting at it with 22, point blank, but it barely bled the thing. I got a 5 rounds and I started hitting it with the gun butt, but it wasn't budging. Didn't even register that I was there. It's clawing at my dad, taking off bits of his flesh. It starts on his torso, ripping off the skin, his tit, then it moves up. It tore off his throat, it tore off his nose, his eyes, it scalped him. Then it started digging in, ripped off the bottom half of his jaw, little bones and that tube in your neck, and his ribs. I don't exactly remember what happened, but somehow my dad's knife ends up in this thing's shoulder. My dad ends up on my back. I'm running, and by God I'm running faster than I ever run before or after. And it's following me. I end up back in the woods opposite the one we've been in, heading towards my landlord's house because it's half a mile away. I can hear this thing screeching and moaning. I pass these tree branches, and I hear them crack, and I get thrown around, It sounds like someone's taking ash to every single tree I pass. It's cracking so loud and often, but I just ain't looking back. Finally, I trip in the gravel. I look up, and there's my landlord and a bunch of his buddies drinking around a campfire. I scream and cry, and they come over. I'm telling them to call an ambulance, and he looks at me. And I'll never forget what he said. "What is that on your back?" he asked me. Just as he said it, he saw one of those god-awful flannel shirts my dad wore everywhere. It was what was left of my dad. Most of his head, his torso, but nothing after the waist. Suddenly we hear it, screeching. He grabs me. My dad gets thrown on the ground. I'm fighting him, crying, because I still think we can save him somehow. My dad had been gone before I ever even picked him up. He asked to pick me up and throw me inside before I come with him. He and his buddies were all inside, and they're locking doors and getting guns. Landlord's asking me what happened, but I just don't know what to tell him. He pieced enough of it all together to understand there was something dangerous there. All the lights in the house are on, and someone calls the cops. They'll be there within 15 minutes. We look outside and we see it walk in front of the fire they'd made. Don't know what it is. One of them says it looks like an ape. Suddenly something goes to the window. We shoot at it, but it ain't the thing. It's my landlord's dog. Just the body, not its head or legs. We start pushing things through the doors and windows. We hear something in the garage. I remember one of his friends saying that the doors were open. We hear metal and glass just get ripped apart. We put a couch and a TV in front of the door to the garage. Banged around some more, but then it got quiet. Not silent like it was before. We hear it move around some. The guys were talking, making sure the guns were ready. Someone hands me a pistol. No sooner did they cock the hammer back, we hear something shatter upstairs. We hear it shriek again, except now it was louder, and didn't echo and fade out because it was inside. We all rushed to the one door leading upstairs, and we got to it just as that thing did. It opened just a bit, and 4 or 5 men just slammed into it. It got its hand through. Someone with a shotgun took care of that. Put the barrel right up to its wrist and pulled the trigger. Cut its hand off clean. That only pissed it off, though. It started pushing on that door, clawing. We were on one side pushing as best as we could, and was on the other doing the same. That wood just wasn't going to hold. Someone tells us to keep our heads down. Suddenly the top half of the door is just gone. My ears are ringing, and there are splinters everywhere. 2 or 3 of them just unloaded on the top of that door. Don't really know where it went after that. Police got there. I was still glued to that door, what was left of it. Someone was up before they got me off of it. They put me in a hospital for a while. A lot of people talked to me, but I didn't talk back. Not for a long, long time. When I got back home, I got a job for the landlord working on the farm. We didn't talk much, not about the thing. But I signed up for the army when I was 19. He sat me down to drink some scotch as a send-off. I asked him right away what the police told him. So where they went with was a wild animal. Probably a wolf, or maybe a bear that migrated north. I asked him how could they say that when they had the hand. He looks at me, stunned. He tells me that the hand had never made it back to the station. The cop who had it in his car, wrecked, drove into the tree, died on impact. The hand was never found. Probably taken away by an animal. The cops, when they would acknowledge the hand existed at all, said it was simply the paw of a bear that looked like a human hand. I never talked to the landlord again. He went missing when I was in basic. Never found him. He said he owed some people some money and just ran away, but I don't think it's that simple. I never went back to those woods. I wouldn't even if I had to go a whole goddamn U.S. Army in my back. But that was a lie. When my mother died, I didn't think my father felt he had anything left. He might as well settle old scores. He went to those woods. He never came back. The FBI was called. They did a show for everyone involved, but I knew they weren't really looking. I had to get one drunk and slip him a few 50s before he finally told me that they got a few calls about those woods every year. Every year. about someone up and vanishing. But that was all he wanted to tell me. Before I got up and left with the rest of his team, he wrote the rake onto a napkin. I didn't know what I meant until I searched for it on the internet. Honestly, I would have rather not known.